Taoiseach, people across the country are receiving letters and correspondence reviewing their medical card eligibility and entitlement, and in many cases taking medical cards away from them, causing huge anxiety and distress to many, many people. But within this general cull of medical cards from the population, there has been a particularly nasty focus on people with very serious illness and people who would have had discretionary medical cards. They would have been over the income threshold, but because of the seriousness of their medical conditions, they would have been in receipt of a discretionary medical card, including cancer and other conditions, motor neuron, to mention but a few. Now, the figures tell the story, Taoiseach. A short few years ago, there was about 80,000 people in receipt of discretionary medical cards. Now that is down to 56,000, a reduction of 24,000 discretionary medical cards within the system, affecting young children with multiple conditions and complexities, many adults, obviously, with severe illnesses, and indeed incapacitated senior citizens. I believe it's a nasty attack, it's underhand, it's sneaky, and its bottom line is to save money. But it's hitting the most medically compromised within our health service. It is hitting patients who can least afford to lose the medical card because of the additional expenses and costs associated with the illness and condition that they have. Now, there's been official denials on an ongoing basis from yourself, from the Taoiseach as late as last Thursday, and indeed from HSE. And I was struck by a letter written towards the end of July by Professor Orla Hardiman to the Irish Times, when she said that she read with interest the statements of the HSE indicating that those with severe life-threatening illnesses will continue to receive medical cards. I am puzzled, she said, by the disparity between the policies enunciated and our recent experience in the motor neuron disease clinic, and goes on to say over the last number of months many, many detailed letters have had to be written by that clinic to the HSE in respect of people who were refused medical cards and who had medical cards taken from them. What I want to ask you, Taoiseach, fundamentally is, will you reverse this policy and will you restore people to discretionary medical cards who've had them taken from them, and change and reverse the policy that is underway?
Thank you. Micheál.
Thank Deputy Martin for his question. There hasn't been any change in the policy that's adopted here. The number of people with free access to GP care is now the highest in the history of the state. 43% of people now have access to free GP care. That's 40.7% have medical cards and 2.72 with the GP visit cards. So in the last 2.5 years, there are now more than 250,000 people extra with access and eligibility for free GP care. As of the 1st of August this year, Deputy, there are 1.866 million people now have a full medical card, and a further 131,000 people have the GP visit card, which is a total of 1,991,000. When the government was elected to office, discretionary medical card applications were not routinely assessed by medical personnel. Minister Riley instructed the HSE to establish a clinical panel to assist in the processing of applications for discretionary medical cards. And this process allows for medical professional people to have an input into granting a medical card to people who exceed the income guidelines but who face difficult personal circumstances, such as a particular illness, and we all know people who are in that particular category. So discretionary medical cards are awarded to people that are unable, without undue hardship, to arrange GP services for themselves and their families. I might say to Deputy Martin that the number of discretionary medical cards has fallen because over 22,000 discretionary medical card holders now qualify for an ordinary medical card, as they now meet the income eligibility. Indeed, since 2011, 22,584 individuals who previously were recorded on the medical card register as having eligibility for discretionary medical cards are now registered as ordinary medical card holders, as they now meet the income eligibility. The HSE is only entitled to award medical cards in accordance with the Health Act. Therefore, applicants, of course, have to be assessed. And the 1970 Health Act, as you're aware, states that persons who are, and I quote, unable without undue hardship to arrange GP services for themselves and for their families qualify for a medical card. Therefore, there is no, and never has been indeed, an automatic entitlement to a medical card for persons with a specific illness. That's the position outlined in that 1970 Health Act that I've mentioned. So there's no legal basis, therefore, for what people might call a cancer medical card or a motor neuron disease medical card or whatever. But that doesn't mean, of course, that in applying the assessment of what's here, that those people do not qualify in their particular circumstances for a medical card. As well as that, Count Corla, there is also the question of discretionary medical cards in emergency situations. There is a system that has now been put in place for the provision of emergency medical cards for patients who are seriously ill and who are in urgent need of medical care that they cannot afford. And emergency medical cards are issued by the HSE within 24 hours of receipt of the required patient details and a letter of confirmation of the condition of the patient from a doctor or a medical consultant. So with the exception of terminally ill patients, the HSE issues all emergency cards on the basis that the patient is eligible for a medical card on the basis of means or undue hardship, and that the applicant will follow up with a full application within a number of weeks of receiving that emergency card. And as a result, medical cards are issued, therefore, to a named individual with a limited eligibility for a period of 6 months. This always applied with the flexibility that community welfare officers used to have. Cancora, finally, in respect of discretionary medical cards for persons who are terminally ill, has obviously a slightly different interpretation here. Once the terminal illness is unfortunately verified, patients are given an emergency medical card for a period of 6 months. And given the nature and the urgency and the sensitivity of that issue, the HSE has put in place an expeditious process to ensure that that person get those cards as quickly as possible, and rightly so. So the HSE ensures, Deputy, that the system responds to the variety of circumstances and the complexities that are faced by these individuals with these, personally very traumatic situations as quickly as possible.
Taoiseach, the great problem with your reply is, and I'm not talking about the general population of medical cards, because the determination of that, of the numbers given out at the moment, is a function of unemployment. High unemployment equals higher numbers of medical cards issued. That's a fact. I asked you a very specific question in relation to discretionary medical cards, and your answer, in many ways, is completely in denial of the reality on the ground. I mean, I quoted for you earlier Professor Hardiman from the Motor Neuron Clinic. And what she simply said is, and I'm not going to repeat what I said earlier, but she said, I have drafted many letters to the HSE in support of appeals by people with advanced motor neuron disease who have been refused medical cards. And that just rubbishes everything you've just said. I've also written many letters for people in the terminal stages of their illness whose medical cards have been withdrawn for reasons that are entirely unclear. Now, that was written on the 26th of July to the Irish Times. And in an article on August the 7th by Paul Cullen dealing with this specific issue, the professor again rubbished the claims that emergency medical cards were issued to terminally ill patients within 24 hours as, quote, simply untrue. I went through my own files in my own constituency office, Taoiseach, today. A 12-year-old young boy, very serious, complex issues, refused a medical card. A 6-year-old boy with complex medical issues, very complex, refused a medical card. And a number of others, in terms of adults with very significant issues, complex issues, refused medical cards. We're not talking about holding on to their discretionary medical cards, taken from them and refused. Now, when people watch in on Leinster House and they hear the Taoiseach's response, and they hear the Taoiseach's response last Thursday, and they hear the HSE and the officials speak, they just can't equate that with the reality on the ground. And that's the experience of most deputies here, if they're honest, in terms of the numbers of people who've come to them in recent weeks and months, over the last 12 months. Because, of course, it was signalled in the budget last year that about 40,000 cards will be taken out of the system. But it's those who are medically most compromised are suffering, Taoiseach. And there's no point in telling me there hasn't been a change. There has been a change. And most people feel it on the ground and are experiencing it on the ground. And you need to dig deep into that and make sure, and ensure, that it's reversed.
Taoiseach.
But one of the things that I'm sure that you agree with is that following the change for the central processing of applications for medical cards or discretionary medical cards, is that they're now all treated on the same basis. You had a situation for years where individual community welfare officers, based on their assessment, could make a recommendation for the issue of a medical card as applied under the old health post system. Any deputy who serves here in the House who went through that process would know this, that there were always the cases brought to people's attention every week of different circumstances looking for the award of the medical card. Now, in the case, Deputy Martin, of applications for discretionary medical cards or for persons who have a very serious illness or a terminal illness or their particular circumstances, clearly what I've said to you is that the process is now there for the issue of an emergency card for a 6-month period, but it's got to be based on medical evidence. Now, you mentioned a particular case. I'd like to have the details of that case from you, if that's possible. I get, as an elected representative myself, I get particular.
Sorry, the time is up now. Would you please? The time is up. Thank you. Sorry, Taoiseach.
I get particular claims myself, Deputy Martin. The bottom line here is that over 22,000 people who had discretionary medical cards do not have them now because they're eligible for an ordinary medical card. And since the government was elected to office, there are over 250,000 extra people who have medical cards who didn't have them previously. That's the highest number ever in the history of the state. And what the government want to do is to proceed to a process where we have a situation where we have the best kind of health system which will respond quickly to the needs of people, many of the categories that you mentioned.